Hi, everybody. It's Dr. V here with some of my amazing team. I've got Anne here with me tonight, who's going to be giving this amazing presentation, teaching you how to interpret your wheat zoomer, teaching you all about it, how it works, and wheat, and all the things around wheat and gluten and all the good stuff. And then I've got Mark here with me, and we have a couple of our office team here with us as well. So we're just going to give everybody just a couple minutes to keep on coming in, and I will be right back. I am going to go grab some water. Let me jump in and make sure that everybody can say hi to everybody. Oh, I didn't fix that yet. All right, everybody, jump in and say hi. I fixed that. Hello, hello. Jump in to the chat and say hello. Hi, Susan. I love seeing you all the time. Shauna, hi. I just got to talk to you yesterday. Dennis. Hi, April, Kathy, Gail, Lisa. Oh my gosh, the names are coming in fast now. Yay, yay. I'm so glad that you guys are here. We are super excited to do this live call with you. We have a really nice agenda that we are setting up for our every other week inner circle calls. So thank you again for being here with us. And we are going to get started here in just a second. And I can go ahead and give it over to you. I think we still have a couple of people dropping in, but we can go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Okay. So I recognize a lot of our clients, our current clients in the attendees box. So welcome to all of you guys who we see every week and who are working with our team. And we have a lot of new people, a lot of first-time attendees tonight as well. So welcome to all of you. Tonight, we're going to be talking about gluten-related disorders, and we're going to be doing a lab interpretation for many of our clients who have chosen to do the wheat zoomer test. So let's see a show of hands. How many of you who are our current clients actually have your test results already and are going to be following along, interpreting your own labs today as we do this? Great. Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful.
Good. And if you've done the wheat zoomer and you don't have your results back, we are recording this. And so you'll be able to watch a replay so that you can use this video to interpret your labs once you get those. But if you did do the labs and you have the results, make sure you have them there with you. I'm going to go over the lab in a little bit, section by section, and tell you what each item on that lab means. And for those of you who are new with us tonight, you're not quite sure what lab we're talking about the wheat zoomer lab. So many people have issues with wheat and gluten, and many people don't even know that they're having reactions to that or inflammation to it. So we're going to do a little introduction to what gluten is, why it causes health issues for many people, and then we'll go right into the lab review. So, Dr. V, anything else we need to go over before we hop into the slideshow?
Let me finish this really quick.
If you have specific questions as we're going along, it's best to put them in the Q&A box so that they don't get lost in the chat. So the Q&A box is down at the very bottom of your Zoom. You'll see Q&A. You can just click on that and then you can insert your questions there.
Yes, absolutely. And that I think that was going to be, I think the only thing that I was going to mention was that. So you already covered that.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. So before we dive into the actual test and how to interpret the wheat zoomer and why that test is even important, I want to give you a little bit of background on gluten-related disorders and on why wheat and gluten is even an issue for many people in the first place. So we'll have an opportunity for those of you who are listening and you didn't even know this lab existed and you're interested in doing some testing for yourself. We'll have some specifics for you on how we can help you with that if you're interested. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to use the wheat zoomer to determine diet recommendations beyond just going gluten-free. So before we dive into the specifics of gluten, I want to kind of set the stage here in regards to the body being a superorganism. And what do I mean when I say the body is a superorganism? Well, as you have probably heard, if you do a lot of research on health and gut issues and your immune system and how do I stay really healthy, then you've probably heard that our microbiome and our bacteria in our gut is incredibly important. So we have thousands of microbial genomes in our body that are always interacting with each other, and they're always interacting with our genetics. In fact, the most important organ in our body, some will say, is our gut bacteria, our microbiome, and all the different species that make up what we refer to as your gut microbiome. So let's touch for a moment on autoimmune disease, because as you're going to hear, gluten can be a big trigger and a big root cause of autoimmune disease. So I want to make this connection for you on the gut, which we just kind of briefly talked about, autoimmune disease, and where gluten kind of falls in the mix. So, as many as 7 out of every 10 people are on the autoimmune cascade. What that means when I say on the autoimmune cascade, it means that their bodies have started making what are called ANA antibodies. And if that's a new term for you, what that means in simple terms is that their immune system is starting to react to something, and their immune system is sending out soldiers because there's a foreign invader in the body. And so think about this again. 7 out of every 10 people are already on this autoimmune cascade, meaning their immune system is already starting to react to something in the body. For many people, that's gluten. And their immune system is starting to send out these soldiers. So that's important to know. Let's look at autoimmunity at a glance. So you will hear many different diagnoses when you talk about autoimmune disease. In fact, there are more than 100 diseases that are classified now as autoimmune diseases, and as many as 50 million Americans are now affected by this. There is $120 billion spent annually on attempting to quote unquote treat autoimmune disease. This is money spent on medication, money spent on procedures, on hospital care when someone gets to that point. There are 250,000 new diagnoses of autoimmune disease every year. This is a major cause of death in women. In fact, 75% of diagnosed autoimmune disease cases are women, and 25% of cases are men. So it's more prevalent in women than it is men, but it's absolutely possible for men to suffer from autoimmune disease as well. So this is a really big problem, not just here in the United States. But many European countries are now seeing an uptick in autoimmune disease and numbers similar to this. So it's a big problem. So let's look at all the contributing factors of autoimmune disease. We have dietary components, which we're going to dive into tonight with gluten. We have genetics. There is a small genetic component for many of these conditions. Infections, when I say infections, I'm reverting back to the gut and gut infections. Then toxic chemicals are another big factor. Usually, a person with an autoimmune disease diagnosis has multiple factors. Some people have all of these factors when they're eventually diagnosed and then have to deal with an autoimmune disease. So it's not just one thing that leads to autoimmune disease, it's many things. But the thought now is that it really does begin in the gut, and there's a big gut component. And that goes back to talking about the gut as a superorganism and why taking care of our gut and our microbiome is so important. You will hear many specialists in autoimmune disease now say that autoimmune disease starts in the gut. No matter what the label of your autoimmune disease is, whether it's celiac, which was my first diagnosis, or fibromyalgia, or lupus, or MS, it's thought now that all of that begins in the gut. And so, something to think about if you're dealing with any of those issues, if you've personally had a diagnosis, are you addressing your gut health? Have you dug really deep into your gut and taking a look at what's going on with your microbiome? So, all of that kind of sets us up to talk about gluten and why gluten is such a problem for so many people. Now, remember earlier I said 7 out of 10 people are already on that autoimmune cascade. Well, 7 out of 10 people are sensitive to the peptides in wheat. I don't think that that's a coincidence, right? 7 out of 10 people sensitive to the peptides in wheat, 70% of people. And most of these people don't even realize that their immune system is reacting the way it's reacting to gluten. Some people have obvious symptoms. They've learned, they know right away when they eat something with wheat or gluten that they're going to have bloating or they're going to have constipation or they're going to feel really tired or brain foggy. Some people have none of those symptoms, but it shows up in other places in the body. And we're going to talk more about symptoms in just a bit. This is a really interesting study that I like to use with my clients who, when I mention gluten or wheat, will say, "Oh, I don't have a problem with wheat. I went gluten free for a couple weeks and I didn't notice any difference. I don't think I have any issues with wheat or gluten. That can't be it." I hear that a lot from my clients. And so, this is a study that I like to share with people when I hear that. In this study, it was looking at the effect of gluten on the gut microbiome, specifically on the cellular wall of the gut. So in our gut, we have all the bacteria, we have the microbiome, but our cellular wall, the wall of the gut, is a really, really thin layer of individual cells that are all connected together. And when you have what we call leaky gut or damage to your gut or your intestinal lining, what happens is the cells start to separate, and we call that leaky gut. So, when someone has leaky gut, they tend to have symptoms like digestive issues, gas, bloating, indigestion, diarrhea or constipation, all sorts of symptoms. They can have symptoms outside of their gut as well: fatigue, headaches, inflammation, all sorts of symptoms, right? So, this study looked specifically at how gluten affects that cellular lining in the gut or the digestive tract. And this study looked at 4 groups of people. People who had already been diagnosed with celiac disease, meaning it was proven on testing that gluten was a big problem and was damaging the small intestine for these people. It looked at celiac patients who had healed their gut and were now in remission. It looked at non celiac patients with gluten sensitivity. So, people who were sensitive to gluten, they knew that when they ate it, they didn't feel well or they had symptoms, but they'd never actually been diagnosed with celiac disease. And then non celiac controls, meaning just the average person. And so, what this study found was that leaky gut or separation of those cells in the gut happened in every individual, irregardless of a diagnosis of celiac disease or whether they knew they were gluten sensitive. Even in a healthy gut, a quote unquote healthy gut, a person who thought they had no issues with gluten, gluten caused issues in every single person. So, this study is really important. It actually proves that gluten affects the gut for everyone. We just feel it in different ways, or for some of us, it takes decades of actually eating gluten for us to start to experience health issues because of that. So this study also showed that in a healthy gut, in someone who's really healthy, they're at baseline optimal health, there is damage to the gut when a person eats gluten, actually pretty quickly. I think it was 20 to 30 minutes after eating gluten, the cells of the gut wall started to separate, but those cells would regrow in 3 days. So that's important to know that that happened in a healthy gut. When a person eats gluten over and over and over again, day after day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day for year upon year, after a while, the gut is unable to heal as quickly. And that's when people typically start to see symptoms and have health issues that spring up that you can connect to gluten. So, really important study. And there's several other studies out there that proved the same thing. This second study that I think is really important looked at the most common symptoms in people that had gluten issues. And so many people associate just digestive issues with gluten sensitivity. And that's really not the case. This study specifically was done in Italy, and 38 medical facilities there tracked the symptoms in people who had gluten sensitivity. So these weren't celiacs, these were people that were just sensitive to gluten. And here is what this study found. The most common symptom in 68% of people was lack of well being. And if you think about that, what is lack of well being? That's very general, right? It's just not feeling your best, not feeling well. Lack of well being was the most common symptom, followed by tiredness, so fatigue, followed by headaches, then anxiety, brain fog, numbness, joint and muscle pain, skin rashes, weight loss, anemia, depression, dermatitis, rhinitis, and asthma. So these were the most common symptoms that these 38 medical facilities tracked. And I think this is really important because it shows you just how widespread the effects of gluten can be in the body. It's not only digestive that people experience digestive symptoms. So, gluten is a problem for most, if not all, of the clients that we see in our practice on a daily basis. Pretty much all of our clients have issues with gluten. Here are a list of some conditions that you may not think would be associated with gluten, but in studies have been proven to be associated in many cases with gluten. So, anemia is a really common one. Just having consistently low iron levels, no matter what you're eating, how much iron you're eating, no matter if you're supplementing with iron. Gluten issues can cause anemia because it prevents your body from being able to absorb certain nutrients, and iron being one of them. Osteoporosis is another really common one. So many people deal with osteoporosis, and gluten exposure is a big root cause because gluten can also keep your body from absorbing the calcium you're eating or taking in supplement form, and then allowing your bones to actually use that. So consider gluten as a root cause of osteoporosis. Liver disease and hepatitis, all autoimmune disease, which we've already touched on. Skin conditions from rashes to eczema to dermatitis, all sorts of skin conditions can be rooted in gluten. So it's important to consider that if you're having any kind of skin flare up. Eye lesions, tumors, migraines and headaches, mental health diagnoses, and so that's pretty general, right? But that can be things like schizophrenia diagnosis. There's a big correlation with many people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia and their reaction to gluten. For those people, gluten lights certain areas of their brain on fire, and so schizophrenia, bipolar are probably the two most common mental health diagnoses that you really want to consider. Is gluten a root cause for these? Period irregularities. So many women will have very heavy periods if they're actually gluten sensitive. Elevated cholesterol. If you've done all the things to address your cholesterol, you eat a healthy diet, you exercise, you manage your stress, and your cholesterol just is consistently high, it's possible that gluten sensitivity is causing inflammation that is in turn causing cholesterol to be high. It's something to consider. Miscarriages, Pretty much any and all gut conditions could be rooted in gluten exposure, and many more conditions out there other than these. So next, we're going to talk about the wheat zoomer. We're going to head into looking at the test. So everybody get your tests out if you have those. Um, Before we dive in, let me give you a few specifics about this test. So, this test is looking at all of the peptides of undigested wheat. It is not just the gluten for many people. For some people, it's the lectins in the wheat, or it's the other parts of the wheat plant, like the wheat germ or the wheat grass itself. So this test, I love it because it covers all your bases. You're looking at all 26 peptides associated with wheat. This test actually has 96 to 100% specificity for diagnosis of celiac disease. So if you're coming to see us, we're not looking to diagnose you with anything, much less celiac disease. But I say that because many gastroenterologists and GI specialists are now recognizing this test for its accuracy and its thoroughness, and they're using it to help diagnose celiac disease. And it is thought by many experts in the gluten related field that this will eventually become the gold standard for diagnosing celiac. I'll tell you myself, in my own personal experience, it took me multiple tries of the current celiac blood tests out there before I actually got a positive. I got multiple negative tests, negative biopsy before I finally eventually did get a positive. And that's frustrating. That's frustrating when you're trying to get answers and you're trying to figure out, what do I need to do to address the health issues I'm having? And you can't get an accurate test results. So I love the wheat zoomer because it is very accurate. And I think in a short amount of time, we're going to see it become the new gold standard for diagnosing celiac. So let's dive right into the test. If you have your test in front of you, the first page looks like this. Up at the top, you're going to see these two bars up at the top that kind of give you an overall wheat zoomer score. This particular test, this person was at the tip top of the chart. They were at a 6. They were on the very far end of the test. So that tells us right away, high reaction, high sensitivity to wheat or gluten. So wherever your reading falls on this scale, the higher it is, the more severe of a reaction you're having. And then the second bar is looking at intestinal permeability or leaky gut, level of leaky gut. And it's also kind of rating you on a green, yellow, red scale. Next, you're going to see your positive antibodies. So you see two categories there. You see positive and moderate, and then you see IgG and IgA under both categories. So think of IgA as like the Marines of the immune system. These are produced in the epithelial lining, so in our gut, in our lungs. And so think of this as like the first defense coming out from the immune system. IgG is more systemic. This is probably longer term. You've probably been reacting for a longer amount of time if you have a lot of things in the IgG categories. Either way, we don't want any positive antibodies. So if we're seeing positive things there, whether it's IgG or IgA, it's telling us we're having a reaction. And then down at the bottom, you're seeing everything that you tested negative for. And so let's go into the specific little sections. So the first one you're going to see there is a wheat allergy. This is an actual allergy, like an allergic reaction. I hear sometimes people refer to their food sensitivities as food allergies. And that may or may not be accurate. When we're talking allergy, we're looking at an IgE reaction. That's an actual allergy. And think of something like an anaphylactic, like people who are allergic to peanuts that have massive reaction. You're going to have certain types of symptoms with this type of reaction, allergy-like reaction. So hives, itching, sneezing, congestion, trouble breathing. Those are going to be the most common types of symptoms you see with the wheat allergy. And if you're positive for a wheat allergy, whether it's moderate or high, you're going to want to avoid wheat and gluten in general, just 100% always. You don't want to mess with an actual allergy. In many cases, working on your gut and actually healing your gut and improving your microbiome and the bacteria in your gut can lessen allergies for many people. And not just for wheat, but for anything, for pollen, for grass, for all the things that people are allergic to. A lot of times, fixing and healing your gut will lessen or even make some people's allergies go away. So just know that that's possible. Work on your gut if you have allergies. And so this is an actual wheat allergy. And so you'll see positive or negative here. The next section is looking at zonulin. Zonulin is what we use to measure leaky gut. And so this is not an antibody like we're going to see on the rest of the test. This is a biomarker of intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So again, reverting back to the first page in those little charts, we were seeing intestinal permeability. Zonulin is associated with that reading. So this tells you whether or not you have leaky gut. And so the next section is the celiac panel. This is what's used to test for celiac. They're looking for what's called transglutaminase 2, which are peptides. And if those are positive, it can be considered celiac or gluten sensitivity, IgG. If your second marker, the transglutaminase IgA, is positive, then they definitely consider that a pattern of celiac. And why is that important, right? Why is it important to know if you're celiac or not? I get that question a lot. If I'm sensitive to gluten and I know that, why do I even need to know if it's celiac or not celiac? And I love it when people ask that question, because that tells me that they're thinking about it, and they're thinking about the lifestyle ahead of them of going 100% gluten-free. And so it's important to know, because when you actually have celiac, it means that the villi, or the hair-like structures that are lining your small intestine, it means that you eating gluten, you risk eliminating or wearing down those villi so much that you can't absorb your nutrients. And it's important for you to know that. If you have indications of celiac, it is that much more important that you're avoiding gluten 100%. And so these bottom two markers, these are called deamidated gliadin. This is a peptide of when somebody is not digesting wheat very well. So when that shows up, it puts you at a higher risk for eventually developing celiac. So everything in this panel really does have to do with celiac and that road that leads to progression in celiac. All right, this next panel, the TTG-DGP complex, these peptides will show up in the very, very, very early stages of someone who's likely to develop celiac, as early as 7 years out from an actual diagnosis. And this is the section that's really exciting for me, because this can potentially prevent people from getting to that full-on celiac diagnosis. So if you have anything that is positive in this section, that means you are definitely on the celiac spectrum. And if you continue to eat gluten, even if it's periodically, even if it's in small amounts, you will likely eventually have progression in your small intestine that leads to celiac. So again,
I've got a quick question.
Sure.
So I know we're holding questions in general for later, but since we're on this slide, this one and the last one, if you're showing positive, can you answer for the audience? If you're showing positive or in these areas for this slide and the last slide, then that is indicative of celiac.
Yes, okay. It is. And so think of celiac as like a spectrum. And so the way celiac is looked at now as opposed to 10 years ago, which is when I got my diagnosis. It's looked at a little bit differently now. So it used to be considered as only a genetic thing. Only if you had the celiac genes, the quote unquote celiac genes, could you develop celiac disease. Now, in more recent years, there are people without the celiac genes that are developing, getting to the point of celiac disease. So that is why I feel these two panels are really important, because it can tell you that you're on that spectrum. So if someone is on the far beginning stages of the celiac spectrum, it means they're having severe reactivity. They're having these peptide reactions in their body, these antibody reactions in their body already. And so the longer that goes on, the more damage is going to happen to the gut, right? And so this definitely tells you you're on the spectrum. So it doesn't mean you have celiac disease. You may not be advanced to the point of the small intestine has been damaged, but you're on the spectrum. And if you keep eating wheat gluten, you will eventually likely end up there. So yes, earliest indications of celiac. All right, next panel is the intestinal permeability panel. And so this is looking at leaky gut, and it's really telling us type of leaky gut, because you can have leaky gut in a couple different ways. So zonulin is up here again. We already saw that marker once. They've included it again in this panel. So when you see anti-zonulin, which are the first two, there's an IgG and an IgA. When you see anti-zonulin, that means that your cellular wall has separated. The cells of your intestines, or your gut rather, have started to separate. There's space in between. The food you're eating can slip out of the gut. And when that happens, it gets into the bloodstream and it starts to cause lots of inflammation in the body. And so anti-zonulin, IgG, and IgA means we're having cellular separation. If you see anti-actin, IgG or IgA, that means you're having permeability through the cells. So things are slipping out of your gut because they're actually able to go through your cells. And so that tells you you need to really look at your gut, at your microbiome. Do you have pathogens? Do you have bad bacteria? What else is going on in the gut that's causing that to happen? And then anti-LPS. So LPS is what we call lipopolysaccharides. Think of that as the byproducts of bad bacteria. So it's the exhaust of gram-negative bacteria. Infections like E. coli is a type of bacteria that this could come from, and there's many, many, many others. So what has happened in anti-LPS, either IgA or IgG plus IgM, it means that you have bad bacteria, and the byproducts of that bad bacteria are getting out of your gut and into your bloodstream. And there's 5 ways that this can happen, which I'll go over in just a second. But one of the ways that happens is this bacteria attaches to the fat that you eat. No matter what kind of fat it is, whether it's healthy fat or unhealthy fat. So healthy fat, think of things like avocado and olive oil and nuts, really healthy foods, right? But if you have anti-LPS, that fat is actually not doing you any favors, having too much of that in your diet, because it is allowing the bacteria, the bad bacteria, to leak out of your gut. So for people who have one or both of these in the elevated stages, whether it's yellow or red, my recommendation is that you do not do a high fat diet. You don't want to be eating keto, doing lots of fat. You want to eat a lower fat diet. And, I'm not saying eliminate all fat, because fat is really important. It's important for our brain health. Every cell in our body needs fat to function. So you do need some fat. But for the time being, while you address what bad bacteria is this that I have in my gut, and for that, I recommend doing a gut zoomer test to really figure out, well, what kind of bad bacteria are we talking about here? While you figure that out and then get on some protocols to address the bad bacteria, in the meantime, do lower fat diet just so that we can minimize this bacteria making it out of the digestive tract on the fat you're eating. Okay, let's back up a little bit to LPS. We talked about the lipopolysaccharides, the exhaust of that gram-negative bacteria or the byproducts of bad bacteria. So again, if you have the anti-LPS on this test, it means that that stuff's getting out of your gut and into your bloodstream. So there's 5 ways that this can happen. We talked about the bottom one, which is called lipid raft transitosis or dietary fat. Um, Here are the other 4 ways. So if you have anti-LPS elevated on your test, you also want to consider, do I have any of these things? Do I have a chronic infection somewhere in my body that I'm not addressing? Do I have an open wound that has been there, persistent, that hasn't healed? Do I have gingivitis? Do you have dental issues that you're ignoring or that you haven't gotten taken care of? Our gut bacteria, our microbiome, it starts in the mouth. It starts in the mouth. So if we have infection and bad bacteria in the mouth, that is going to affect the gut microbiome. It's going to affect your ability to heal your gut if you're dealing with a mouth infection that you're not addressing. And then the other way is pathogenic intestinal permeability, meaning we have pathogens. We have parasites, we have bacteria, we have amoebas, there's all sorts of things you could have going on in the gut. Do a gut zoomer is my recommendation. Do a gut zoomer, which is a test that looks very deep into your microbiome, shows you all the types of bacteria you have, good and bad, shows you if you have any parasites or any bad bacteria that we need to address. And so it's always a good idea to do a gut zoomer and a wheat zoomer together for that reason. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Is everybody following along okay? Can I get some hands raised if you're following along and if this is making sense? Yes? Okay, good. Good. How are we doing with questions? Dr. V, Mark, we have any that you want me to address right now? Are we doing okay with questions?
I think we're doing good.
Okay,
I'm managing some here on the back end. I'm getting some really good ones. And
perfect.
so I think we're doing good.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let me reshare. Let's dive back in. This test is a lot. There's a lot of info here. And so sometimes I went over one of these with a client earlier this week and she took a deep breath and she was like, "Whew, that's a lot for me to process." And it can be. If you have a lot of things that are out of range on this test and now you're worrying about, well, what pathogens do I have and how else do I need to change my diet? It can be overwhelming, right? But if you need help with that, we can help you with that. Okay, this next panel is what's called the transglutaminase panel. And so this panel can really help you figure out, are my other symptoms, like symptoms outside of gut related symptoms, are these symptoms potentially tied to gluten? So transglutaminase 3, IgG and IgA, it's very common to have skin reactions if these are positive. So that can be skin rashes, any and all types of skin rashes, eczema, or maybe it's just incredibly dry skin. No matter how much you hydrate, no matter what kind of lotion you use, you always have just incredibly dry skin. Or if you've had some kind of skin diagnosis from like a dermatologist. This was really helpful for me in my own personal journey. I didn't have the digestive symptoms too much. I had a few, but not so much that it sent me to the doctor for digestive issues, right? My main issue that sent me to the doctor was a skin rash. I had a skin rash over the majority of my body that wouldn't go away, that itched like crazy. And you couldn't even see it half the time. It looked invisible, but it itched like crazy. And for me, that was gluten reacting with my body and causing skin issues. So this is one of the ways that gluten reaction can show up elsewhere in the body. Transglutaminase 6, IgG or IgA, means the immune system is actually attacking the brain and the central nervous system. So this can be brain or central nervous system symptoms, brain fog. Think about those mental health diagnoses we talked about, bipolar or schizophrenia diagnosis, anxiety, severe anxiety, panic attacks, depression. You can't figure out why you're dealing with depression. You don't really have anything to be sad about, but you're sad all the time. Mood swings, anger is a really big one. Angry outburst, unexplained anger. That was one of my symptoms as well. If you have anything elevated in the transglutaminase 6 section, I recommend doing a neural zoomer. A neural zoomer is a test that looks for inflammation in the brain, basically, is what it looks for. It can look for different reactions in the body, infections, viral infections, those types of things that are causing brain inflammation. And so, if you have a lot of brain related symptoms, or maybe you've had a diagnosis like Parkinson's, a lot of our Parkinson's clients have issues with gluten, and they will do a neural zoomer to see what other types of inflammation do I have in the brain. So you can always do that test if you'd like to. Let's see. Oops. And then we have the wheat germ panel. Let me make sure I didn't skip one. Yeah, the wheat germ panel. So this is your body reacting to the lectin of the wheat kernel. You're not reacting to the gluten here. You're reacting to the lectins in the wheat. And so lectins are considered anti-nutrients. You've probably heard about them. There's a lot of diets out there that limit or lower lectins in the diet. So lectins are known for sticking to blood vessels and causing them to clump. They're associated with leaky gut, altered immune function, miscarriages, RA, many other conditions can be linked to lectins for some people. And so if you have either one of these, IgG or IgA, that's elevated, my recommendation is a low lectin diet. Because if you have antibodies to the lectin in wheat, you likely are reacting to the lectins in other foods. And there's lots of foods that contain lectins. So again, if you have anything elevated in this section, you want to be on a low lectin diet. And again, that's temporary. That's temporary, not forever. Temporary while we heal the leaky gut and lower your reactivity to lectins. And then many people find they can bring lectins back in and they're not having the same inflammatory response. So here's just a snippet of some of the foods that contain high lectins. There's many more, but grains. So not just wheat, but things like millet and quinoa, which are gluten-free grains, right? Or we're told they're gluten-free grains. Things like oats, rice, any animal products where the animal has eaten grain, which is all conventional animal products in the United States. So you want to be eating grass-fed meats. Or poultry where the birds eat their natural diet and they're not fed grains. That is a really important one, and one that people on a low lectin diet will overlook. They buy whatever meat there is. It really has to be grass fed. Beans and legumes, lentils, peanuts, soy, almonds, cashews. There's some vegetables listed here, a couple fruits, sugar, agave, and there's many others. This is just a little snippet of some of the foods that contain high lectins. Let's look at the next panel. This is gliadin. This is one of the parts of the gluten protein. So this is gluten. And this client had a lot of reaction. All of these snippets came from the same test. And so this client had some big changes to make. She went on a low lectin diet. She went on a lower fat diet temporarily while we did a gut zoomer and then did a parasite protocol for her because she ended up having a massive parasite infection. So anything in this section means that you're reacting to the actual gluten. Gamma gliadin, this one is of interest because anything elevated here is most commonly associated with schizophrenia. So this doesn't mean you have schizophrenia, but many people with schizophrenia tend to have this elevated on a wheat zoomer test. So really interesting connection there. That shows that this affects brain function or it causes inflammation in the brain. And then these two down here, the gluteomorphines and the prodnenorphines. When these reactions show up, it means that gluten is affecting the opioid receptors in the brain, meaning gluten is a drug for these people. It becomes really addictive. It becomes really hard to quit gluten. And when these clients do quit gluten, they might have a period of time where they feel much worse. I had a client once tell me, "Oh, I went gluten free for 2 weeks and then I felt so horrible. I felt so much better when I put it back in my diet." We didn't do this test with her at the time because that was a couple years ago, but she likely had these reactions showing up on her wheat Zoomer test. Really, really common to have that addictive response when you have one or more of these sections elevated. That means that the gluten's affecting your brain. Glutenin is the other half of the gluten protein. And anything here means you're reacting to gluten. It means that being 100% gluten free is what you're going to want to do. And then the final panel on this test is looking at the non-gluten parts of the plant. And so all of these markers here are associated with high inflammation. So anything that's elevated here means it's likely causing systemic inflammation, meaning inflammation anywhere in the body. The amylase protease markers, those two, when something there is elevated, these clients tend to lose weight really easily when they quit gluten. Gluten is causing them to stay in this state of inflammation and to hold on to weight. Really popular book, Wheat Belly, which has been out for many years, was really centered around this type of reaction. It's a great book. All of these markers can contribute to autoimmune disease. So here we tie in what we talked about at the beginning of this presentation and why we focused on autoimmune disease for a bit. Everything in this section, if you have that elevated and you continue to eat wheat, can contribute to autoimmune disease. So that is the test. I'm going to stop share here again for just a minute. Any other questions, Dr. V or Mark, that we need to answer around the panels, the different panels in the test?
Yes, we had one question from Lisa, and I don't remember what slide that you were on, but it was she was asking about, can it be granulare annulare? Her skin doctors say that they don't know the cause. It doesn't itch, but red splotches on the left leg only.
I would consider it as a possibility, right? You can't really look at this test and say, oh, this test says this is the cause of this, particular diagnosis. But if we know that gluten for many people, gluten/wheat for many people can cause massive inflammatory responses in the skin, you have to then consider that it could be a root cause. Not that it's the only reason, not that it's the only root cause, but consider it as a potential root cause. I would.
Perfect.
Okay.
We also, well, I'm going to let you finish and we can wrap up with, whenever you're ready, we can wrap up with how much does it cost? I've already reached out to our office team, as some of them are here with us tonight. Thank you, Angelia and Tara and Erin, for being here. We do have some people asking. How many of you, before Ann finishes, how many of you are interested? I'm going to lower everyone's hands. Hold on. Don't get trigger finger. Don't get trigger finger. How many? You're like, I know what she's going to ask. How many of you are interested, now that you've learned this? How many of you are interested in ordering one? And I ask because we'll do something special for you. If you're already a client with us, you already get a 25% discount on your labs. We'll be able to do a special discount code for you if you're not. And I just wanted to know how many people are interested. Okay. Thank you for letting me know that. And I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay, perfect. So we're almost done. We're almost through the slides here. So the rest of this is kind of focusing on, well, what next, right? After I've done the test and I see, okay, gluten's a problem for me, wheat is a problem for me. What next? What do I do with these results? So, obviously the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to go gluten free, and you're going to want to go 100% gluten free. There is no such thing as gluten friendly or 90% gluten free or mostly gluten free, or I only have it once a month, or I only have it a couple times a year. Gluten causes an inflammatory response that can last weeks, sometimes months. And so it really has to be 100%. And if you have a lot of reactivity, like we just saw on this test, it has to be for life. It's a lifestyle change. Because if you don't do it for life, what's going to happen is you're going to do it for a while. Then maybe you'll retest and the test looks good. All the things have gone back to the green range. But your body has created memory B cells, meaning it remembers that it used to react to the peptides in wheat. So when you add it back in, you might feel okay at first, but the longer you have it back in the diet, the more likely you're going to end up right where you started, because the immune system doesn't forget. And so it really does have to be a lifestyle shift that you do moving forward. And as someone who's on their 10th year of doing that, I can tell you it gets easy. Once you're over the hump, once you're past those first 6 months, that first year, and nowadays not even that long, because there's so many great gluten-free products out there and so many options. And once you get used to it, it's pretty easy. So your mindset plays a huge role. You do have to really tell yourself, hey, I'm going to do this for life for this reason, because I want to be healthy. I want to be at my optimal health. I want to thrive. I don't want to deal with all these symptoms. So mindset's a huge role. Don't forget about emotions. Emotions are going to come up. Food is how we connect with people, right? We have cake on our birthdays. We celebrate with going out to dinner. Food is about connecting with others. And so it can be really challenging when all of a sudden there's all these foods you can't eat. There can be a lot of emotions that come up. And so it's okay to have grief around that. I know I did. I saw a therapist for a year after I went gluten free, because I had to deal with all the emotions and the changes that came up with that. So that's okay. Ask for help if you're struggling with that. Learning about replacements and products that you can use. And again, this is not temporary, it's a lifestyle shift. Let's see. So let's talk about problems with gluten-free products, because the first thing that many people do, I know this is the first thing that I did, was I went to the store, and instead of buying the regular bread, I bought the gluten-free bread. And instead of buying the regular gluten-filled cookies, I bought the gluten-free cookies. And I just made the swaps. I made the real simple swaps like that in all of my products. And that's okay. I'm not saying don't do that. That will get you started. That will help you learn about what to look for in products and how to label read. Do that. That's okay if that's your first step. And it's very common that there's cross contamination in foods that are labeled gluten free. So commonly cross-contaminated in the United States, and some of these were new to me when I learned this recently. Some of these are gluten-free grains: millet, buckwheat, quinoa. Those are gluten-free grains, naturally gluten-free. But here in the United States, all of those things are considered cross-contamination because of the way they're manufactured and packaged, and they share facilities. So if you're really trying to heal, it's not safe for you to eat those foods. Ideally, you want to be grain free when you're in the beginning stages and you're trying to heal. Then later, after you've healed your gut, many people have success adding in gluten-free grains, certified gluten-free grains. So be careful in that area if you're new to this. Oats are now considered always cross-contaminated in the United States. Even certified gluten-free oats are now considered always cross-contaminated. So my recommendation is ditch the oats. And foods have to only be tested for gliadin, which is one peptide. All the foods that you see on the store shelves that are labeled gluten-free, even the fancy certified gluten-free, they only have to be tested for one peptide. And we just went over 26 peptides in the wheat zoomer test. So the labeling is not accurate. And it's really unfortunate that the policies and laws around labeling for gluten-free products is as loose and careless, in my opinion, as it is, because as consumers, we're not being given accurate information. So I tell you this so that you're armed with the knowledge when you go to the store to be really selective about what you buy. And the less products that are prepackaged in labels, the better. Stick with the naturally gluten-free things like fruits and vegetables and things that don't come with the label. So, how do we help our clients remain gluten-free? It can be a challenge sometimes to make this really big lifestyle change. But these are two really important points that I like to make to my clients. One, if you stop eating wheat today, like stop 100% eating wheat today, you're going to have antibodies that remain in your body for 2 to 6 months. So if I stop wheat today and in 6 months I decide I want to have a bite, I'm starting that process over. So if you're mostly gluten-free, but maybe you eat it once a month, you're keeping that inflammatory response active. If you eat it a couple times a year, you're keeping that inflammatory response active. And it takes as little as just a couple of breadcrumbs to cause an inflammatory response for people who are highly sensitive. So it's very little. Just one bite is an issue. It really is. So that for people can be big motivation. I don't want to undo all the progress I just did for the past 6 months. So I'm going to stick with this. And the other thing I like to tell my clients is no supplement out there is going to prevent these reactions. There are all sorts of gluten supplements out there, gluten blocker, gluten digest this, digest that. Some of them are good at helping you digest, so helping your body break down the gluten, but your immune system's still going to recognize it and cause an inflammatory response. So while some of these products can be helpful, it's not going to prevent you reacting to wheat or gluten. So just keep that in mind. So another important thing, when you're going gluten-free, it is very important that you replace what we call prebiotics in your diet. So there's actually a big benefit to wheat. The ingredients or the microbes in wheat actually help your gut create, ferment good bacteria. So we call those prebiotics. Wheat is a prebiotic. And so for many people, when they take all the wheat out and they go gluten-free, they're taking out a really big source of their prebiotics. So you want to make sure that you're replacing that wheat with other foods that are going to be hefty in the prebiotics. And those are listed here: root vegetables, pectin, which comes from apples, bone broth, and then fermented vegetables, things like sauerkraut and kimchi. And doing one of these on a daily basis is recommended indefinitely. Just include these things on a regular basis in your diet, and that will help make sure you have adequate prebiotics to really support your gut health. Here are some supplements and protocols. So this right here specifically is for healing your gut. These are some really great supplements for healing your gut. For those of you who are in our program and we're working with you, you're going to see all of these ingredients in your gut repair protocol when you get there in that part of your protocol. But if you're not working with us, just this is for you education wise and what these different supplements can do for you. Vitamin D, really important to have adequate vitamin D in your body. That's what actually keeps those tight junctions in the gut. It keeps keeps that cellular wall closed. Vitamin D is used very heavily in that process. So having adequate vitamin D is important. Fish oils help bring down inflammation and bring out good bacteria. Glutamine is wonderful for healing the gut lining. Curcumin, which is in turmeric, is great for lowering inflammation. And then colostrum is great for not only healing the gut, but recolonizing the healthy flora in your digestive system. And then if you are going to use a supplement for helping your body break down gluten, E3 Advanced Plus is my favorite. It breaks down all the peptides of wheat. So why am I mentioning this if I just told you that no supplements are going to help? So when I use this is like, for example, if I eat out at a restaurant and I'm worried about cross contamination, I will take this. When I was in my initial healing stage, which was like the first 2 years or so, I did not eat out in a restaurant. I didn't put myself in that situation. Now that my gut is healed and my body is healthy again, and I have a good gut microbiome, I can tolerate a little bit of gluten exposure. Having said that, I do not eat it. I never eat it. I never knowingly eat gluten. But if I'm going out to a restaurant and I'm ordering a gluten-free meal, I don't know what's happening in the kitchen. What if somebody accidentally, uses a utensil that causes some cross-contamination? This is an enzyme that will help break down any little remnants like that I might get cross-contaminated with. So I use this in a situation knowing that if I do get cross contaminated, I'm probably still going to have symptoms and it's still going to cause inflammation and I'm still going to feel it. But this helps me break it down and digest it. So this is a band-aid is what this is. But it's an important item that you can have in your toolbox for when you do get your gut healthy again. And then finally, let's talk about probiotics. Probiotics, incredibly important. If you've been through finding out that you have massive reaction to gluten, you likely have a lot of work to do on your gut. And that involves rebuilding your microbiome, populating really good bacteria in the gut. So all of these types of probiotics listed here are really good at rebuilding your flora after you've quit gluten and gone gluten-free. I will say that some probiotics work better for some than others. So sometimes you might try one that you just don't feel well with. That's okay. Sometimes you have to try a few before you find a probiotic that works for you. But really important to do probiotics every day indefinitely. And I say that for anyone, not just people with gluten issues. I think that might be the last slide. Let me stop share. Yes, it is. Okay, so any questions? Any remaining questions that we need to get to?
We do have some questions if you're willing and able
Sure.
to, if you want to take a quick drink real fast.
Good.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, there's a couple questions that came in that if you don't eat gluten or wheat,
Mhm.
is there any need to still continue to a wheat zoomer?
Mm. So yes, there is. Um, because how careful are you? Do you eat out? If you eat out ever, it's likely you're getting cross contaminated unless you're eating at a 100% gluten free restaurant where they don't have gluten in the kitchen. Um, and there's gluten in other places, which I didn't go into in this presentation. But if you take any prescription medication, there's a high likelihood that they have gluten in the medication. So many prescription medications contain gluten. Um, there's gluten in body care. If your shampoo has gluten, if your lotion has gluten, if your makeup, your lipstick that's on your mouth has gluten, then there's potential for you getting gluten that way. The things we put on our skin, our body absorbs. So if your immune system is producing antibodies to gluten, if it's going through your skin, that can potentially be a big problem too. So a lot of times people think they're eating 100% gluten-free when they're really not, when they're really getting cross-contaminated in places. So the wheat zoomer can actually be a great way to prove I'm 100% gluten-free. It can tell you if you're getting cross-contaminated or not.
Hmm.
Mm.
Jesse asks, and this could be a tag team between you and Dr. V, could you please explain again the indicators for transitioning from non-celiac to celiac disease?
The indicators. Okay, so that's tough because it depends on what your symptoms are. So usually it's just a progression of symptoms, right? And so if someone's having symptoms that are not gut related, like they're not noticing that they're bloated, or they're not noticing that they have diarrhea or constipation or gas, or any of those things that we associate as gut symptoms, if someone's not noticing those things, it can be really hard. It can be really hard to tell how you're progressing on that spectrum. So I will say that once you're in that range of celiac disease, then that really does mean that you're having damage to the small intestine. So what you're going to likely see is nutrient deficiencies, malabsorption of your foods, and so that could be inability to gain weight. That could be weight that you can't lose. That could be vitamin D deficiency, even if you supplement. That could be iron deficiency, calcium deficiency. And then all of those conditions that I showed on one of the slides that we know are associated with gluten exposure, like osteoporosis, high cholesterol, liver issues. So, sometimes you have to just look at all the symptoms you're experiencing, kind of like a story, like we do with our clients, and then kind of decide, should I get a test? And then you can just always do a test. You can always just do a wheat zoomer test, and it's going to tell you if you're on that celiac spectrum. Mhm.
Pretty good. Dr. V, you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Mhm.
Good. We have a couple questions about brands. What brand of colostrum do you recommend?
We actually have Dr. V. Doesn't our Bio One Sciences have colostrum?
We don't have any colostrum right now.
I don't know why I thought that had colostrum. Here's my thing with brands. Just look at the quality of the supplement company you're using. Um, don't go buy something at Walmart or your grocery store, or not even really on Amazon. Go to a reputable place to get your supplements, or a reputable company. I know if you're with us on Full Script, there's multiple colostrum based supplements on Full Script. So you can always go there and search if you're looking for one, and there's quite a few there. I think the PRP spray, which is a really good gut repair spray, has colostrum, and that one's on Full Script.
And
Oh, you know what? That's absolutely right. I don't know what I was thinking. In our gut repair,
That's what I
we
thought.
have, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we actually have a colostrum based gut repair. So we have two different ones. One of them has L-glutamine in it, and there's no colostrum. Instead, it uses L-glutamine, which is a wonderful gut repair agent that can be used. But some people prefer not to use L-glutamine, either because they have the GAD double gene mutation, like they have a homozygous mutation in their GAD gene, or maybe for other reasons. If you know that you have a a homozygous GAD mutation or GAD mutation, that can tend to lead to anxiety and mind racing if you take a gut repair supplement that has L-glutamine in it. And so we have another option, and that is one that does not have L-glutamine, and it is colostrum based instead. And so, yes, Anne, my apologies, we do have one. Yes.
And so on our website, go to bio1sciences.com, and you'll see GI activation or GI activation S. Those are the two.
Yes. The S stands for sensitive. So just in case you were wondering. So, but yes, you can go on and you can check it. It's actually a really, really good one. And then we have a couple of questions on pricing. So here's what we're going to do. Hold on just a second, because I've got to pull this up. All right. So we have, I was writing it down. Our wheat Zoomer is $559.80. And if you are a client of ours working in one of our programs, if you're an active client, you get 25% off of that. So that's a really good deal. It's a really good deal anyway. We're able to get lower prices than most other people because we order more volume of labs around the world than anybody else. So you'll get 25% off your $559.80. If you are here with us tonight and you want to order it, we're going to do 10% off. So you're going to get about that would be around $55-$60 off. And this is what I'll want you to do. I'm going to see, I think we'll be able to email this group who attended tonight. But just in case, team, if you could put our office email in the chat. I want you guys to grab the office email off the chat, please. Those of you, when I say you guys, those of you who are watching, and email us and let us know that you want to order the wheat Zoomer and get your 10% off. So we're going to offer that through Monday at the end of the day. So you'll have between now and the weekend to get that request in, get it paid for so that we can do it. And I'm going to do one other offer for you. We recently got a special deal handed down to us that I want to be able to pass on to you. Now, we did not go over the gut Zoomer tonight. We only went over the wheat Zoomer, although, Anne, aren't we going over the gut Zoomer at our next call?
I believe it's the next one. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know how long the special is going to be because the lab company called us and told us about it, and we were doing backflips. So the gut Zoomer is another test. It's super comprehensive, way more comprehensive than the typical GI maps that you might be familiar with. It's normally $1,035. That's a pretty expensive test. We're able to offer you a special of both the wheat Zoomer and the gut Zoomer for $897. And that's really, really good. That's unheard of because that test is super, super expensive. And again, I don't know how long that's going to last. You can wait for 2 more weeks, but I don't know if they're still going to be giving us that price in 2 weeks. And I'm not trying to do a sales thing on you. I don't care if you order it or not. I'm just trying to give you a really good deal because they called us, and whenever they pass along these deals to us, we always pass it along to our clients. Since we started doing the inner circle calls, and we have other people that are joining us to get educated who, maybe are not working with us. I want to offer it to you too. So I'm not gonna like just hang that over your head and not give you something that's really good. So for $897, you'll be able to get both if you want to do that. So I'm sorry, we don't have more information on the gut Zoomer, not for another 2 weeks till we have our next live. But if you are interested in it, go ahead and do that. So Deborah, it looks like we don't have a special just on the gut Zoomer alone. They only are doing it as a bundle, and they do that. I think it's because of the way that they do their testing. They've tried to explain that to us before, like with the toxin labs, how we combine the toxin labs of the mold toxin, the chemical toxin, the heavy metals, and the organic oats. If you order those separately, that's almost $2,000 worth of testing, right? But we're able to do it at way less cost because we bundled it, and we've been not fighting with them, but negotiating with them for 3 years to get the prices down to where we've gotten them. And only because we do such a big volume that we're able to get the cost down when it's bundled like that. So if you just want to order the one, it's going to be the $1,035, and you're a client, right? So you'll get the 25% discount off that. You actually get a better deal if you order them both together. And this is the thing, order them both together. And if you just did a wheat Zoomer and you don't need to do another one, order them together anyway. And then just do the one that you want to do and save the other one and do it in 9 months or 10 months or 12 months, right? Just save it for later. We didn't mention a brain test, Karen.
Oh, we did
Oh,
talk
did we?
about the neural Zoomer. I
Oh, the
mentioned it.
neural Zoomer. Oh, okay. Are you wanting to know the price on the neural Zoomer, Karen? Do we have that on the schedule to go over?
We do not. Mm-mm.
Yeah. How many people are interested? I'm going to lower everyone's hands. Don't get trigger finger. I just want to know, because we can always change up what we're going to be talking about over the course of the next 6 months. We already have outlined what we want to talk about every 2 weeks for the next 6 months, but we can always change it. How many of you are interested in the neural Zoomer? Can I get 10 more hands? There's 25 up. Would you guys be interested? So neural Zoomer would be good if you are having brain fog, if you're having depression, if you're having anything brain related. It's gonna be great. If you have autoimmune issues and you're having brain issues on top of that, neural Zoomer, right? Really, really good. We combine that with the tox bundle that also has the organic acids test, so we can look at patterns of neurotransmitters. We can combine that with the gut and the wheat Zoomer, because all of those things directly affect your brain chemistry and your brain function. So we can put those pieces together for people. Okay. All right, that's enough people. Anne and I will look at the schedule and we'll see where we can fit that in. Since we did the wheat Zoomer tonight and we're doing the gut Zoomer next time, maybe we can see what's on the next one after that, and maybe we can stick that in there just so that we're doing all those Zoomers all back to back.
That sounds good. And somebody asked about dairy in one of the chats. There's a dairy Zoomer, just like the wheat Zoomer. Vibrant does a dairy Zoomer for people who know they have issues to dairy, but they're not quite sure what part. Dairy is just like wheat, and that there's many, many molecules and peptide reactions that you can have to wheat. So there's also a dairy Zoomer. Neural Zoomer, good for Parkinson's? Yes, Gloria.
Maria asked if you could give the name of the enzyme again you were mentioned.
Yes, let's see. That is, let me pull it up here. It's E3. It is called E3 Advanced Plus is the name of the enzyme. So you can go online and Google it and you'll find it.
Leanne says, if your sister has been diagnosed with celiac, as well as your niece, and is there a really good chance that you will also have celiac?
It's a
Or be
great
gluten
question.
sensitive?
It's a great, great question. So there is a genetic component to celiac. So there's that. If it's in a family, it's probable that you're going to have others in the family who are sensitive to gluten. From my own personal experience, I had a celiac diagnosis, and then my other immediate family members, my mom and who I think is on the call tonight, my mom and my brothers, 2 of my brothers went gluten-free, even though they weren't having necessarily symptoms that they thought were related to gluten. And they all feel so much better after going gluten-free. So there's a possibility there. There definitely is.
Susan says, I'm allergic to dairy. I've always been interested in colostrum, but is there a way to kind of ensure that there's no casein or whey put in the colostrum?
There is no casein or whey in our colostrum products. Absolutely not. Especially with the work that we do with such sick people, we are not giving you anything with dairy in it. Yeah.
And most people who are sensitive to dairy have 0 issues with colostrum. It's like a totally different, even though it comes from dairy, it's like, it's the purest form. Most people just do not have issues.
Mhm. I call it the elixir of life. It's basically cholesterol. I mean, it's colostrum is the mother's first milk, right? And so it has magical, very healing properties in it. As you can imagine, as mothers, most of us know how powerful that colostrum is for our babies. And so, and by divine design, right? That's the very, very first thing that our babies get when they leave the womb and they come into this world is they get the colostrum, which sets them up for their brain health and their immune health and their overall body health for the rest of their life. It helps set them up with the proper microbiome. I mean, so it's really, really powerful stuff, the colostrum is. And just like Ann said, yes, it comes from dairy, but it's not dairy.
Mhm.
So
There's a
perfect.
lot of questions about psyllium husk. Does that for fiber? Does that have gluten in it?
So psyllium husk is, from seed. And so here's the trick. Here's where it gets really tricky. So it depends, right? So something like that that's naturally gluten-free, you want to look at the practices of the company that actually gets it on the shelf. Because if you ever have paid attention to labels, you'll see this is on rice all the time. Rice is naturally gluten free, but you'll see processed in a facility that also processes wheat. So, what that means when you see that on a label, it means that if you're highly, highly, highly sensitive to gluten or wheat, that's not a safe product for you because there's the chance of cross contamination. So, you want to consider cross contamination. Wheat is one of the big 8 allergens in the US. So, wheat has to be put on a label by law if there's wheat in a product. And so that's if there's a chance, there's wheat. That's why they do the has been processed in a facility that processes wheat because they don't know, but there's a chance. So that's where it gets really tricky and confusing for us consumers. And you really just have to know your source. What kind of company am I buying this product from? What are their practices?
Excellent.
Uh-oh.
Okay,
Amazing.
okay.
Yay. Thank you. This was a really great turnout. Did
Mhm.
you guys like this tonight? We've got some really, really cool stuff coming up on the schedule. So next week, just before we let you go, just to remind you, next week we're going to be talking about the gut zoomer, correct, Anne?
Yes.
Is that
It's
right?
not next week, right? But it's in 2 weeks. Is that
That's
correct?
what I meant. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's not next week.
Let me pull up. I just for the sake of people
Yeah.
looking
And
at us.
and the other thing that we want to do, I hadn't had time to do it yet, was to actually post out like a schedule of the talks ahead of time. I haven't had
Mhm.
an opportunity to do that yet.
So
But
I have
I
it here.
will.
I pulled it up. I pulled
Oh,
up the
perfect.
schedule. So yes, the next one is March 9th. And so yes, I think that's in 2 weeks. And that will be interpreting the gut zoomer test.
Yay. Well, there you go. So come back and join us for that. And thank you for joining us. Everybody go get some rest. I know in the Philippines it's probably in the morning now, I'm guessing. I'm not sure what the time zone is, but Glenn, because that's you, Glenn, right? But everybody else have a wonderful evening. We love you guys so much. And thank you for joining us and giving us the opportunity to educate you and empower you in gaining sovereignty over your health. Thank you. Bye.